The morning sun beat down on Andrew's back as he carefully planted the new flowers around the apartment building's entrance. Sweat dripped from his forehead, but he didn't mind. There was something deeply satisfying about working with his hands, especially on property he owned himself. Andrew Thomas hadn't always been a property owner. Just 8 years ago, he was struggling to pay rent on his tiny one-bedroom apartment across town, working 2 jobs and saving every penny. His grandmother had always told him, "Land is the only thing they can't make more of," and those words had stuck with him. So instead of buying the fancy car his friends expected when he got his first good-paying job at the tech company, Andrew saved. And saved. And saved some more. His first property was a small fixer-upper that the bank had foreclosed on. Andrew spent weekends repairing it himself, learning plumbing and basic electrical work from YouTube videos and asking questions at the hardware store. He rented it out, saved those profits, and bought another. Now, at 36, he'd owned several properties in Oakwood Heights, including this apartment building and 3 houses in the same neighborhood. Andrew stood up, stretching his back as he admired the red and yellow tulips he'd just planted. He bought this particular building 6 months ago, and it needed a lot of work. Rather than hiring everything out, he'd decided to live in one of the units himself while overseeing the renovations. Unit 3B wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable, and being on-site meant he could keep a close eye on the contractors and make sure the work was done right. Pride of ownership, his grandmother would have said with a nod. He reached for his water bottle and took a long drink, feeling someone watching him. Glancing up, Andrew noticed a woman standing at the edge of the property, arms crossed tightly over her chest. She was maybe in her 50s, with blonde hair cut in what his sister would call the "Can I speak to your manager" special. The woman stared at him with narrowed eyes, her lips pressed into a thin line. Andrew raised his hand in a friendly wave. "Good morning," he called out. The woman didn't wave back. Instead, she looked him up and down, taking in his dirt-stained jeans and t-shirt, then turned abruptly and marched back toward the large colonial-style house across the street. Andrew shrugged and went back to his gardening. In neighborhoods like this, there was always someone who thought they ran the place. Later that afternoon, Andrew carried boxes from his car to his apartment. He'd been slowly moving things from his old place, taking his time since he wasn't in any rush. As he walked up the stairs balancing a box of books, his phone rang. It was Darnell, his property manager. "Hey, just giving you a heads up," Darnell said. "Got a call today from someone claiming to be from the HOA. She was asking a bunch of questions about the new tenant in 3B. Andrew set down the box and leaned against the wall. "Let me guess, blonde hair, kind of uptight looking. Didn't see her myself, but she definitely sounded uptight. Wanted to know if you've been properly screened, how long your lease was, all that. I told her we don't give out tenant information." "Good," Andrew said. "What did she say then?" "Oh man, she was not happy. Started talking about HOA regulations and how she's going to be watching that unit closely." Darnell paused. "You want me to tell her you're actually the owner?" Andrew thought about it for a moment. He'd dealt with nosy neighbors before, but something about this felt different. The way the woman had looked at him that morning, like he didn't belong there, had bothered him more than he wanted to admit. "No," he finally said. "Let's see how this plays out. I've got all my paperwork in order if anyone asks me directly." After hanging up, Andrew walked to his window and looked out at the neighborhood. It was beautiful, tree-lined streets, well-kept homes, kids riding bikes along the sidewalk. This was exactly the kind of place he dreamed of living in when he was younger. The kind of place where some people still didn't expect to see someone who looked like him unless he was mowing the lawn for someone else. He unpacked his books, placing them carefully on the shelf. Tomorrow was the monthly HOA meeting. Maybe he'd drop by, introduce himself properly. After all, he was planning to be part of this community for a long time. What he didn't know was that the woman he'd seen that morning had already made up her mind about who he was and who he wasn't, and she was just getting started. A week had passed since Andrew first noticed the woman watching him. The weather had turned cooler, perfect for moving the rest of his belongings into apartment 3B. As he carried a small table from his truck, he saw a shadow fall across the parking lot. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, like someone used to being listened to. Andrew turned to find the same blonde woman from before standing there, this time wearing a blue blazer and holding a clipboard. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" Andrew set down the table, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I'm Beverly Wilson, president of the Oakwood Heights Homeowners Association." She emphasized her title as if it should impress him. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." Andrew extended his hand. "Andrew Thomas. Nice to meet you." Beverly looked at his hand for a moment too long before giving it a quick shake. "Mr. Thomas, I've noticed you coming and going from this building quite frequently. Are you visiting someone?" "No, I just moved into 3B, Andrew explained, pointing toward his second-floor apartment. Beverly's eyebrows shot up. "Oh, I wasn't aware of any new tenants." She glanced down at her clipboard, flipping through some papers. "These apartments aren't normally leased to. Well, we have a very specific tenant profile in Oakwood Heights." Andrew felt a familiar tightness in his chest, but kept his expression neutral. "He'd been here before. What kind of profile is that, Ms. Wilson?" "Long-term professionals who understand the value of our community standards," she said quickly. "How long is your lease arrangement?" "I don't think that's really any of your business," Andrew replied calmly. Beverly's smile vanished. "Actually, it very much is my business. As HOA president, I need to ensure all residents are properly vetted and understand our rules." She pulled out a thick binder from her oversized purse. "This is our HOA rulebook. Every legitimate resident has one." Andrew took the binder, noticing how heavy it was. "Thank you. I'll be sure to read it." "See that you do. We don't tolerate rule breakers here." Beverly looked pointedly at the table Andrew had been carrying. "For instance, moving hours are strictly between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. on weekdays." Andrew checked his watch. "It's 2:30 on Tuesday." "Yes, well," Beverly seemed annoyed at being challenged. "There's also the matter of proper documentation. I'll need to see your lease agreement and approval paperwork." "Why would I show you my personal documents?" Andrew asked, genuinely curious. Beverly's face flushed. "Because I'm responsible for maintaining the quality of this neighborhood. We can't just have anyone waltzing in here claiming to be a resident." She looked at his modest furniture, "especially when they don't seem to match the community profile." An older man walking his dog slowed down as he passed them, clearly eavesdropping. Andrew noticed and decided to end the conversation. "Ms. Wilson, I have every right to be here. If you have concerns, you can contact the property management company." Andrew picked up his table. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish moving in." "This isn't over," Beverly said, her voice lower now that they had an audience. "I'll be contacting the management company immediately, and I'll be watching you, Mr. Thomas. Oakwood Heights has standards." As she walked away, the man with the dog approached Andrew. "Don't mind Beverly," he said quietly. "She gives everyone grief, but especially," he trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "Especially new people?" Andrew supplied. The man nodded, looking relieved at the out Andrew had given him. "I'm Richard, by the way. 4A, he gestured to a nearby building. "Nice to meet you, Richard. Word of advice, document everything with Beverly. She's got that HOA board wrapped around her finger, and she's not above bending the truth to get her way." After Richard left, Andrew stood in the parking lot for a moment, thinking. He had hoped this move would be straightforward. Now it seemed he had a problem on his hands. Inside his apartment, Andrew called Darnell, his property manager. "Hey, just a heads up. The HOA president just confronted me. Name's Beverly Wilson." "Let me guess," Darnell sighed. "She wanted to see your lease." Among other things, she also made it pretty clear what her real issue is, though she was careful not to say it outright. "Want me to handle it?" "I could let her know you're actually—" "No," Andrew interrupted. "Not yet. Let's see how far she's willing to take this first." After hanging up, Andrew opened his laptop and created a new folder, HOA Interactions. Something told him he'd be needing it. He also made a note to attend the upcoming HOA meeting. It was time to get a better sense of what he was dealing with. 2 weeks had passed, and Andrew couldn't step outside without feeling Beverly's eyes on him. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Whenever he left for work, she happened to be getting her mail. When he came home, she was watering plants across the street that surely couldn't need that much water. On Tuesday morning, Andrew found a bright orange notice tucked under his windshield wiper. "Parking you violation," it screamed in bold letters. "Resident vehicles must display current parking permits. Towing at owner's expense will begin in 24 hours. Andrew took a photo of the notice, then another of his car parked perfectly in his assigned spot, the parking permit clearly visible on his dashboard. This was the third bogus violation this week. Getting another one of those, huh? Andrew turned to see Richard walking by with his dog, a friendly golden retriever who strained at the leash to greet Andrew. "Hey Max," Andrew said, bending down to pet the dog. "And yeah, seems like I'm collecting them." Richard shook his head. "She gave those to the Johnson family too, when they first moved in last year. Only stopped when their son joined the high school football team and became the star quarterback." He lowered his voice. "Beverly's all about standards until you become useful to her somehow." "Good to know," Andrew said, tucking the notice into his growing file of harassment evidence. "How are those Johnsons doing now?" "They moved out after 6 months. Couldn't take it anymore." Richard looked apologetic, like it was somehow his fault. "Most of us aren't like her, you know." Andrew nodded. "I know." That evening, Andrew was grilling chicken on his small patio when a sharp knock came at his door. He opened it to find Beverly standing there with another woman, thin, severe-looking, with glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Mr. Thomas," Beverly said without greeting. "This is Nancy Peters, our HOA secretary. We're here about noise complaints." Andrew blinked. "Noise complaints?" "I've been grilling dinner." Nancy looked down at her clipboard. "We've received reports of loud music and disruptive gatherings coming from this unit." "That's impossible," Andrew said. "I was at work until 5:30, and I've been alone since I got home." Beverly crossed her arms. "Several neighbors have complained." "Are you calling them liars?" Andrew took a deep breath. "I'm saying there must be some mistake." "Who exactly complained?" "We protect the privacy of our residents," Beverly snapped. She peered past him into his apartment. "Is that smoke? Are you aware that open flames on balconies are against HOA regulations?" "It's an electric grill," Andrew explained, "which is explicitly permitted on page 42 of the rule book you gave me." He'd read every page of that binder, suspecting he'd need to know the rules better than Beverly herself. Beverly's eyes narrowed. "Well, there's also the matter of your unauthorized guests last weekend." "I didn't have any guests last weekend. I was visiting my mother." "Our security cameras show multiple people entering this unit," Nancy chimed in. "That's impossible," Andrew said firmly. "I was out of town from Friday evening until Sunday night. I have receipts, photos, and witnesses who can confirm that." The two women exchanged glances. "Nevertheless," Beverly continued, "these violations are adding up. The board will be discussing your case at Thursday's meeting." "Perfect," Andrew said. "I'll be there." Beverly's smile was cold. "I'm afraid it's a closed session. Residents under review aren't permitted to attend." After they left, Andrew called Darnell. "They're escalating," he said, explaining what had just happened. "Man, that's straight-up harassment," Darnell replied. "You want me to step in now?" Andrew thought about it. "Not yet. Let's see what they try to pull at this meeting first. Can you check if there even are security cameras here?" "Already did," Darnell said. "There aren't any. Beverly had them removed last year to save on HOA fees." That evening, Andrew found another notice taped to his door. This one warned that the HOA board would be voting on enforcement actions regarding his ongoing violations. As he carefully added it to his file, his phone dinged with a text from Richard. "Heads up. Beverly's going door to door asking people to sign a petition about problem tenants. Just thought you should know." Andrew looked around his neat, quiet apartment. He'd faced discrimination before, but never this blatant, this organized. For a brief moment, he considered revealing who he really was, the owner of not just his building, but several others in the neighborhood. Not yet, he decided. Beverly was digging herself into a hole, and he was going to let her keep digging. Andrew sat at his kitchen table, spreading out all the violation notices, warning letters, and photos he'd collected over the past 3 weeks. The pile was getting thick. There were orange parking tickets for spots he'd never parked in, noise complaints from times he wasn't even home, a written warning about a barbecue that never happened. And the latest, a notice about unapproved decorative items that was really just a small potted plant beside his front door. This is getting ridiculous, he muttered to himself. His phone rang. It was Darnell. You're not going to believe this, Darnell said without preamble. That Beverly woman called our office again, 3 times today. Andrew leaned back in his chair. What did she want this time? First call, she demanded to know your employment history and credit score. Second call, she wanted to know if you had a criminal record. Third call, she asked if we could provide a copy of your lease agreement to the HOA board. What did you tell her? Same thing as always, that we don't share tenant information with third parties. Then she got all huffy and said she'd be filing a formal complaint against our management company for harboring unauthorized residents. Andrew could almost hear Darnell rolling his eyes. Man, I really think it's time to tell her who you are. Andrew rubbed his temples. Not yet. I want to understand what's really going on first. He hesitated. Hey, could you do me a favor? Can you check if Beverly is actually renting that house across the street? The big colonial with the white columns? Give me a minute, Darnell said. Andrew could hear keyboard clicks in the background. Yeah, here it is. Beverly Wilson, leasing 1542 Oakwood Drive. Been there about 3 years. Andrew smiled for the first time that day. And who owns that property? More clicking. Well, would you look at that? It's one of yours. You bought it in that package deal last year. That's what I thought. Andrew's mind was racing. How about her HOA status? Can you check if she's really the president? Let me call Tammy over at Oakwood Management. Darnell put him on hold. While waiting, Andrew walked to his window and looked out at Beverly's house. She was in the front yard, talking to a couple Andrew hadn't met yet. From her gestures and their uncomfortable expressions, he guessed she was probably talking about him. Darnell came back on the line. Got the info. Beverly Wilson is indeed the HOA president, elected last year. But get this, their bylaws state that the president must be a homeowner, not a renter. So she's breaking their rules. Looks that way. My guess is nobody bothered to check when she ran. Want me to report it? Andrew thought for a moment. No, hold on to that. It might be useful later. After hanging up, Andrew made himself a cup of coffee and returned to his paperwork. He needed to be methodical about this. He separated the notices into categories: parking violations, noise complaints, property appearance issues. Then he matched them with his evidence, photos of his properly parked car, receipts showing he was out of town during alleged noise disturbances, pictures of other units with identical potted plants that received no violations. The pattern was clear. Beverly wasn't just targeting him randomly. She was systematically building a case to try to get him evicted. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It wasn't Beverly's sharp rap, but something gentler. It was Richard, looking nervous. Sorry to bother you, Andrew, but I thought you should know. They held that HOA meeting tonight. The one I wasn't allowed to attend. Richard nodded. I wasn't there either, not on the board, but my wife is friends with Nancy's husband. She says Beverly convinced everyone to issue you a final warning. He handed Andrew an envelope. Nancy's supposed to deliver this tomorrow, but Jim slipped it to my wife tonight. Andrew opened it. Inside was an official HOA letter stating that due to persistent and willful violations, he was being given 72 hours to remedy all outstanding issues, or the HOA would pursue all available remedies, including legal action for removal. They can't actually evict you, Richard said. They don't have that power, but they can make your life miserable with fines and lawyers. Andrew nodded. Thanks for the heads up, Richard. I appreciate it. After Richard left, Andrew added the letter to his file and pulled out his phone. It was time to make a call. Hello, this is Olivia Chen, answered a crisp voice. Olivia, it's Andrew Thomas. Remember that legal situation I mentioned might be coming up. I think I'm ready to move forward. Send me what you've got, the attorney said. We'll talk in the morning. Andrew looked at his organized evidence. Beverly thought she was building a case against him. She had no idea he'd been building a much stronger one against her. Olivia Chen's office was on the 12th floor of a downtown building with a view of the river. Andrew sat across from her desk, watching as she flipped through the folder of evidence he brought. This is quite thorough, she said, adjusting her glasses. You've documented everything well. I had a feeling I'd need to, Andrew replied. Olivia closed the folder. So what do you want to do about this? We could file a harassment claim, possibly a discrimination suit. There's enough here to make a solid case. Andrew leaned forward. I've been thinking about that, but before we go that route, I want to try something else. He explained his plan. Olivia listened, then nodded slowly. It's more restrained than what most people would do in your position. I can draft the letter today. 2 days later, Andrew was washing dishes when someone pounded on his door. He knew that knock by now. Beverly stood there, face flushed with anger, holding a piece of paper. What is the meaning of this? She demanded, waving the paper in his face. I believe that's a cease and desist letter, Andrew said calmly. My attorney thought it would be best to formally request that you stop harassing me before we pursue further legal action. Harassing you? I'm simply enforcing the rules that everyone in this community agrees to follow. Rules that somehow only apply to me. Andrew raised an eyebrow. The letter explains everything, Beverly. The false noise complaints, the parking violations for spots I never parked in, the made-up barbecues. It's all documented. This is ridiculous, she sputtered. You can't threaten me. I'm the HOA president. Actually, about that. Andrew leaned against the doorframe. The HOA bylaws clearly state that the president must be a homeowner. You're a renter. Beverly's face went white, then red again. That's not true. I own my home. No, you don't. You lease it, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with renting, except when you break rules that you claim to enforce. For a moment, Beverly seemed at a loss for words. Then her eyes narrowed. This changes nothing. The board has already voted. You have until tomorrow to comply with all HOA regulations, or we'll begin eviction proceedings. After she stormed off, Andrew called Darnell. How did it go at the management office? Just like you thought, Darnell said. She came in demanding information about you, waving that HOA letter. She didn't recognize me from previous calls. I'm just another face to her. And you gave her the file? The special one we prepared? Yep. She snatched it and left without even saying thank you. Andrew smiled. Perfect. That evening, Andrew spotted Beverly showing the file to Nancy and 2 other board members in Beverly's front yard. They were huddled together, looking at papers and nodding. Mission accomplished. The next morning, Andrew found an official-looking envelope taped to his door. Inside was a notice on HOA letterhead. Final warning. You have repeatedly violated HOA regulations despite multiple notices. The board has voted unanimously to proceed with eviction measures. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises or legal proceedings will commence. Security will arrive on Sunday at 9 a.m. to change locks if necessary. Andrew took a photo of the notice and sent it to Olivia. Her response came quickly. They've crossed the line. This is illegal on multiple fronts. We're good to go. Andrew spent the afternoon making phone calls to the property management company, to his bank, and finally to his older brother, who'd been following the whole situation with growing anger. You've been more patient than I would have been, his brother said. You sure you don't want me to come over there? No need, Andrew replied. But thanks for offering. I think the board meeting on Sunday morning is going to be eventful enough without adding anyone else to the mix. He hung up and looked around his apartment. Everything was in place for Sunday, the documents, the recordings, the witnesses. Beverly thought she was about to win, to finally get rid of the person she decided didn't belong. She had no idea what was coming. Sunday morning arrived with perfect blue skies. Andrew adjusted his tie in the mirror and checked his watch, 8:30 a.m. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock, just when the security team Beverly had hired was supposed to show up to change his locks. His phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. In position. Board members arriving now. Andrew took a deep breath. He'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, but still felt the flutter of nerves in his stomach. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about making sure what happened to him didn't happen to the next person who moved into Oakwood Heights. He picked up his leather portfolio containing all the documents he needed and headed out. As he walked toward the community center where HOA meetings were held, he spotted Richard on his porch. Good luck in there, Richard called, giving him a thumbs up. The community center was a small building near the neighborhood playground. When Andrew walked in, the room went silent. 8 people sat around a conference table, the 5 HOA board members, including Beverly at the head of the table, plus Olivia and 2 people Andrew had never seen before. "You weren't invited to this meeting," Beverly said sharply. "This is a closed board session." "Actually," Andrew replied calmly, "I'm exactly where I need to be." Olivia stood up. "For those who don't know me, I'm Olivia Chen, Mr. Thomas's attorney." She gestured to the strangers. "And these are Ron Williams from the County Housing Authority and Detective Lisa Garcia from the Police Department's Civil Rights Division." Beverly's face paled. "This is irregular and inappropriate. We're conducting official HOA business." "Yes, you are," Andrew said, placing his portfolio on the table. "You're conducting the business of trying to illegally evict me based on false claims and discriminatory practices." Nancy adjusted her glasses nervously. "Beverly, what's going on?" "Don't let him intimidate you," Beverly snapped. "He's the one breaking rules. We have documentation." "You mean the falsified documentation you created?" Andrew opened his portfolio and pulled out copies of all the violation notices, alongside his evidence disproving each one. Parking tickets for cars that weren't mine. Noise complaints for times I wasn't home. All witnessed and documented. The board members looked uncomfortable as Andrew laid out page after page of evidence. "Furthermore," Andrew continued, "your planned eviction action today is illegal on multiple counts. First, the HOA has no legal authority to evict residents. Only property owners or management companies can do that. Second, the 48-hour notice period violates state law, which requires a minimum 30-day notice even for legitimate evictions." The man from the Housing Authority nodded. "What's happening here is textbook housing discrimination and harassment." "This is absurd." Beverly stood up, hands shaking. "We've done everything by the book. He doesn't belong here." The room went silent at her outburst. "And there it is," Olivia said quietly. Beverly realized her mistake. "That's not what I meant. I meant he doesn't belong here because he doesn't follow the rules." "I think we all know exactly what you meant," Andrew said. He turned to the rest of the board. "But there's something else you should know. Something Beverly has been hiding from all of you." Andrew pulled out the last document from his portfolio, a property deed. "According to your bylaws, the HOA president must be a homeowner. Beverly isn't. She's been renting her house for 3 years." The board members looked shocked. "That's a lie," Beverly insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "It's in the county property records," the Housing Authority representative confirmed. "The house at 1542 Oakwood Drive is owned by a limited liability company." "But here's the really interesting part," Andrew continued. He slid the property deed across the table. "The company that owns Beverly's house, it's mine." Beverly stared at him, uncomprehending. "I'm not just a tenant in 3B, Andrew explained. "I own the entire apartment building, and 3 houses in this neighborhood, including the one Beverly lives in. I've been her landlord this entire time." The silence in the room was deafening. Nancy's mouth hung open. Another board member muttered, "Oh my God." Beverly stood frozen, her face a mask of shock as the reality of the situation slowly dawned on her. "You're she whispered. "You can't be." "I am," Andrew said simply. "And we need to have a serious conversation about your future in this community." The community center remained silent for what felt like forever. Beverly sank back into her chair, her face drained of color. The other board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly processing the bombshell Andrew had just dropped. "So," said Nancy, breaking the silence, "you've been her landlord this entire time, while she was trying to evict you." Andrew nodded. "Ironic, isn't it?" One of the board members, an older man with silver hair, turned to Beverly. "You told us he was an unauthorized tenant who snuck in without proper screening." Beverly started, but words seemed to fail her. "I was fully approved by the property management company," Andrew explained, "which reports to me as the owner. Every complaint, every violation notice, every accusation was manufactured to try to force me out." The detective cleared her throat. "What we're seeing here is a clear pattern of targeted harassment based on discriminatory motives. The county takes these matters very seriously." The board members looked worried now. The silver-haired man spoke up again. Are you planning to press charges against the HOA? Because most of us were just going off what Beverly told us. My focus isn't on punishing the entire HOA, Andrew said. My concern is making sure this type of harassment doesn't happen again to anyone. Outside the window, Andrew spotted two burly men in uniform approaching the community center, the security team Beverly had arranged to change his locks. Olivia saw them too and stepped outside briefly to speak with them. When she returned, the men were walking back to their truck. They won't be bothering anyone today, she said with a slight smile. Andrew turned his attention back to Beverly, who still hadn't spoken. I could evict you, he said quietly. I have more than enough grounds. Or I could raise your rent to the maximum allowed by law. Or I could sue you personally for harassment and discrimination. Beverly finally looked up, eyes wide with fear. Are you going to do that? The room was tense, everyone waiting for Andrew's answer. No, he said finally. That's not who I am or what I want. But there need to be consequences, and there need to be changes. For the next half hour, Andrew laid out his terms. Beverly would resign as HOA president immediately. The discriminatory practices would end. The HOA would implement anti-bias training for all board members. And Beverly would attend community diversity workshops. And one more thing, Andrew added. The HOA needs new leadership, people who care about building a community rather than excluding people from it. He looked around the table. I'd like to nominate Richard from 4A to serve as interim president until proper elections can be held. The board members, eager to avoid legal consequences, readily agreed to all terms. Beverly sat silently, occasionally nodding when a direct response was required. As the meeting concluded, people filed out quietly. The detective and the housing authority representative exchanged business cards with Olivia. Soon, only Andrew and Beverly remained in the room. You must hate me, Beverly said softly, staring at the table. I don't hate you, Andrew replied. I don't even know you, Beverly. You never gave me the chance. My husband left last year, she said unexpectedly. After 20 years, he just left. The HOA was the only place where what I said mattered to anyone. She looked up, her eyes damp. It's not an excuse. I don't know why I'm like this. Andrew nodded, not offering easy forgiveness, but acknowledging her words. The workshops might help. And maybe you could try getting to know your neighbors as people, not as rule breakers or rule followers. Outside the community center, Richard was waiting with several other neighbors who had heard something big was happening. So, Richard asked, how did it go? Andrew smiled. Let's just say there's going to be some changes around here, starting with a new HOA president. He held out his hand to Richard. Interested? In the weeks that followed, Oakwood Heights began to transform. Richard brought a more inclusive approach to the HOA. The ridiculous violation notices stopped. Andrew introduced himself properly as a property owner at the next community meeting, where he proposed creating a neighborhood garden where people could grow vegetables and get to know each other. As for Beverly, she kept mostly to herself at first, but eventually Andrew spotted her hesitantly helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries. Later, she showed up at the community garden planting day, working quietly alongside everyone else. It wasn't a perfect ending. Real life rarely has those. But it was a start, a community beginning to heal and grow together, learning that the differences between neighbors were far less important than what they could build together.